Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 9 scary stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Liking the video is the best way to let me know I'm doing a good job, and it also helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I'm currently trying to reach 125,000 subscribers. The channel seems to be growing a little bit again lately, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, new and old. I love what I do, and the fact that I get to share it with anybody at all is very special to me. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. My cousin told me a curious thing once. "I don't believe in hell," he said. "There is no kind of pain that a person can't get used to, or even learn to appreciate." I've thought a lot about that. As long as we have the means to perceive our surroundings, we have the capability to appreciate it. If you've been on the internet long enough, you know what kind of absolutely vile things people have come to love. I don't believe I'm any different. It started back in 2016. I worked my second year as a lab assistant for a pharmaceutical company, a large Midwestern one with the blue sunflower logo. Lower end of the pay scale, high end of the benefits kind of gig. I didn't have that much going on in my life. It was just this endless cycle of overtime, sleep, and overtime again. I had an apartment on the 3rd floor. Modern place with a huge elevator and reflective glass in the hallways. They had a deal with the company and offered a rent cut for everyone who worked there, making it a sort of corporate hangout spot along with a home. I thought I was going to hate it, but I ended up appreciating it. But there was a fire. I don't know what started it, but it turned the 1st floor into an inferno. I was fresh out of the shower when it happened, barely covering myself with a towel. The alarms blared. It was so quick. You can feel the flames eating the air around you before you feel the heat. A hitch in your throat. It was hot enough for you to get boils by just stepping into the hallway. I tried making my way downstairs, while my neighbor across the hall locked himself in his apartment. Last I saw of him, he and his family peeked at me through a closing door, their eyes reflecting the spreading flames from downstairs. I didn't make it far. Everything looks different in the smoke, and I got turned around. I tried to push forward, but it was too late. I knocked on doors, begging for shelter, but no one answered. I ended up in the corner of a hallway, pushed up against the elevator, feeling the heated metal melt the outer skin of my hand. Your throat closes up. You can see heat build on your arms, boils bursting like poxes. And before you pass out, you dissociate. You can't really believe it's happening. I knew I should have panicked, but I just shrugged it off. It wasn't real. It was like another world, another me. It wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I'd never experienced anything like that in all my life, so it had to be a hallucination. But that's the thing about experiencing something for the first time. You don't realize what it is. That's the best way I can describe it. Dying. I was only out for a couple of seconds, maybe half a minute before the firefighters found me. They dragged me out and wrapped me in a blanket. I had 2nd-degree burns all over, 3rd-degree in some places. Those hurt less. It burns through the nerves. You don't feel that until you start to recover. Waking up was unreal. I didn't understand that I'd been bandaged all over my head. I just thought they'd turned off the lights. I couldn't feel a thing, courtesy of a more than generous corporate health insurance and an even more generous dose of morphine. I remember someone talking to me, but I could barely hear them on one side. An eardrum had ruptured. and my left ear had fused to the side of my hairless head. "Oh, thank God," a voice said. "Thank God you're gonna make it." My little sister, Sammy, she'd flown in from Ottawa. I was in and out of consciousness for days. I had nightmares about pain and anxiety about the drugs wearing off. Sometimes I'd hear machines beeping. Once a nurse changed a bandage, and it felt like getting my skin torn off. I remember drawing in a breath to scream, and then just gone. Blackout. I'd get these glimpses of real life sometimes. Someone humming in the hallway, my sister talking on her phone, a beam of light hitting the bandage across my eye, tickling a damaged membrane. I prayed not to feel anything because I knew that it'd just be more pain, unbearable, mind-numbing agony, your body turning inside and out, trying to heal everything at once, hitting biological dead ends over and over. I think it was night when someone came into my room. They talked to Sammy. They sounded apologetic. She cried. Then a little later, someone else came into the room. They had something else to say. Her tone changed. "Hope? Please," she said. "Whatever it takes." They rolled me into an elevator and then outside. There was a mild breeze that stung like nails on my missing skin. Transport. Sammy calling out in the distance. "We'll take good care of him." The prick of a needle. I couldn't feel a thing. I was out for at least 36 hours. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed, looking up at the ceiling. No bandages covering my face. A soft gray membrane covering my left eye. I blinked it away and instinctively raised my arm to wipe it off. The arm was covered in a thick, dark, ink-like substance. It clung to me like a putty, but I could barely feel it. I'd never seen anything like it before. My entire body was covered in it. It was on my face, too, even on my eyes. But it worked as a sort of one-way mirror. It didn't block my vision. The closer you looked, the more translucent it was. It was fine. No pain. No restricted movement. Nothing. I sat up, accidentally pulling out a couple of wires from my arm. I looked down at my body, only to see that all-covering ink putty dry up and sink into my skin, like morning dew on a dry lawn. Didn't feel a thing, not even a tickle. A nurse came running just moments later, ready to get to work. Sammy was with her, but when they saw me standing there, it was like there was a cooling breeze seeping through the room. The tensions just melted away. I'd never seen my sister in that state before, her hair having thinned at the edges of her ear, and the bags under her eyes looking purple, her face sunken, like she'd forgotten how to smile. But seeing me, she lit up like dawn. She ran up to me with her arms open but stopped. "Can I hug you?" she asked. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I said. "Yeah." So we hugged, and over her shoulder, I could see a corporate representative waiting for me in the hallway. If you are confused, just know that I was too. We're getting there. Information was spotty at best. Someone threw around a project called Black Bell. The name Super Adaptive Nano Liquid was mentioned a couple of times. Basically, Sammy had given them the go-ahead to try a new treatment. I must have been on the candidate list since I was a loyal worker, and leaking company secrets would not only get me sued, but cost me my career. Part of the deal was weekly checkups and participating in their trials. I could quit if I wanted to, but chances were that I'd go right back to that hospital bed if the treatment wasn't completed. I didn't really have a choice, but I didn't blame them for it. They had their own interests to look out for, and I'd been given this amazing opportunity. I could walk right out of there. That's worth an NDA. Coming back to the office a couple weeks later, there were some people talking about me. They said the treatment had been developed in one of our branch labs in Vietnam. It had been mentioned in a couple of memos as something tested in relation to vacuum treatment and low oxygen environments. I'd seen it too, but had no idea it had regenerative properties. I mean, you can read something on paper, but seeing it in action is another thing entirely. Most people didn't believe I'd really been in a fire. They thought I'd been taking time off, riding the coattails of an accident that consumed my apartment. I could have shown them pictures, but that would somehow make it even more unbelievable. I decided to let them think whatever they wanted. The higher-ups knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. So slowly, but surely, I got back into that endless cycle of overtime and sleep. Sammy was sticking around for a while to make sure I managed, but apart from that, it was business as usual. Of course, what you see on the surface isn't always telling the whole story. I'd stay up at night imagining that excruciating pain writhing just underneath my skin. What if there was a hiccup in the treatment, or some kind of side effect? Could all of it really come back? Could one wrong step send me back to the hospital bed? I'd lose hours of sleep worrying, looking up at the ceiling of my new bedroom, closing my eyes but not sleeping, still feeling the heat of the flames licking my skin, the hair on my arms curling up to die, little parts of me blending with the ashes, the smell of my own flesh cooking. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was 2 weeks into my new routine when I had my first panic attack. Someone brought in a birthday cake to work, and they blew out the candles over lunch. There was something about the faint glow of fire reflecting on their skin that sent a spiral of thoughts rushing through me. Heat. My pulse ran away from me. I could imagine my skin trying to sweat, but the pores being melted shut. The pain I imagined wasn't real, but the memories it brought on sent it all to the forefront of my mind. I politely declined a piece of cake and ran to the bathroom. I threw up and curled into a corner, forcing my eyes shut. But no matter how hard I tried, I felt the pain, a mild heat latching onto me, burying itself in my skin. You can't think away a panic attack. You just have to ride it out, and wish the next one is shorter. Talking to Sammy about it over dinner, she decided to stick around for a few more weeks. I hadn't asked her to do it, but she was happy to. She'd made baked potatoes. I'd forgotten to buy new cutlery and plates, so we had to settle for paper plates and plastic forks. A single naked light bulb hung overhead. "You talk in your sleep, you know," she mentioned as the oven dinged. "I hear it through the walls." "What do I say?" "It's not really words, it's just like sounds," she said. "Long, drawn-out vowels, but it kinda sounds like words." "I'll try to keep it down." She gave me an apologetic look. She knew I couldn't control it, and she knew I couldn't try even if I wanted to, but it was a nice thought. It got worse, though. I would have nightmares and wake up choking. I'd feel my skin getting warmer at night. My anxiety would pop off at seemingly random times, kicking me out of whatever comfort zone I had managed to make for myself. It could strike fast and stick around all day. After a while, it was more unusual for me to have a good day than a bad one. Coming home from work one day, I stopped at a light. I sat in my car, hands on the wheels, seeing the light turn red as I came to a full stop. The radio jockey chuckled about putting on some classic dad rock for a caller, and put on Kiss with the song Hotter Than Hell. It's a nice song, but it put my mind in an uncomfortable place. I stared at that red light, hoping I wouldn't see the yellow light. Something about the glow of it put me right back there in the hallway, squirming around on the floor. The meat on my hand getting cooked on the surface of the heated metal elevator door. I closed my eyes and felt something. A soft, cooling coat expanded across my skin. The treatment, it was still there. I remember someone honking. Maybe the light had turned green, but I couldn't risk looking. I couldn't open my eyes. Maybe it would hurt. Maybe it had all turned dark. 100 maybes, locking my hands on the steering wheel and keeping my eyes closed. Then, a flicker. It's like I manifested it. A spark reacting with my skin. Fire. It must have looked like an explosion, all the air getting sucked out at once, breaking the windows. The car popped from the released pressure as the entire car lit up. Ungodly pain. I couldn't scream. A single flame danced on my eyes as they fused shut. Nerve endings exploded with agony as the bones on my knuckles exposed themselves to the open air. It happened so fast. Like someone shutting off the lights inside your mind one by one. Sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch, thought. You can't breathe. There is no air. You don't know what you're doing. You can't feel yourself. Are you standing up? Sitting down? Impossible to tell. They say I was completely engulfed in flames for a solid 2 minutes before a passerby managed to pull me out of the wreckage. They said I was covered in a black liquid, which they thought was motor oil. I was dropped onto the pavement and the flames were put out by bystanders. The treatment kept me alive through all of it. Alive, but suffering. It kept me on the edge of life, not allowing me to cross over. And the agony stuck with me for what felt like an eternity. But eventually the sirens came. The EMTs would never hear of what would be a second miraculous burn victim recovery. I'd walk out of that hospital a couple of days later without any questions asked. The treatment put me right back into square one. Perfect physical condition, with a couple of mental asterisks. Well, the firefighters didn't understand what happened. The corporation did. Apparently, my ceaseless obsession with fire was triggering an adaptive reaction. Basically, I was tricking myself. By thinking so much about burning, it became the normal state of being, and the treatment adapted to it. It basically thought I wanted to burn, so it set me on fire. At least that's how it was explained to me. Knowing the cause of the issue helped, but also not. It's hard to put yourself in a state of mind where you're not allowing yourself to think certain things. It's like biting your nails or picking your nose. Thinking of how you can't do it makes it worse. Knowing that thinking too much about this one thing might cause a fire was all-consuming as the flames themselves. Sammy didn't leave me, though. She figured out a couple of things we could do to alleviate stress. For example, I could start sleeping in the bathtub, and we could remove anything flammable. No drapes, no plastics. We also kept a fire blanket nearby. It was uncomfortable, but you can get used to anything. It was nice to know that it was there in case I needed it. A precaution. It puts you at ease, and you stop obsessing over it as much. I'd go to weekly checkups. They'd had me fill out forms, rating sensations and experiences on scales from 1 to 10, and rarely, too often. A lot of it was generalized questions, but a couple of them were specifically made for me. These questions didn't have a standard answering sheet. There'd be some overpaid academic listing off questions with a nonchalant smile. Every week, a different smile, but the same attitude. I got the impression that I wasn't the only one testing this treatment. The questions they asked implied that others were having trouble as well, but in completely different ways. Multiple choice questions like, how often do you forget to breathe? How often do you forget to sleep? How much has your sense of touch diminished? With possible answers ranging from hourly to monthly. I made more adjustments in my everyday life. Fire blankets, extinguishers, Once I filled the tub with water before sleeping, as I felt an episode coming on. The ink would seep out of my skin to keep me from going hypothermic. It really was adaptive. Sammy did her best to help, but something she said stuck with me. As I was heading to work, she took some time cleaning out the tub. I asked her if she was okay doing that. "It's not that different from changing bandages," she said. "You gotta adapt either way. At least there's no pain, right?" Trauma seeps into you like a poison. The bad days become the new normal, and the good days become this impossible deal you strive to get. That perfect day without that sinking feeling in your chest, where you can sleep a little longer without waking up tired, where you can say you had a nice dream and can afford to put some effort into caring for yourself, have that extra long shower, the freshly pressed clothes. But I couldn't do that. I'd be balancing on the edge, ready to burst into flames. I wouldn't wear my best clothes. I'd stay in the tub at night. I would keep my distance from my sister and my coworkers. All these little things you do to keep yourself from becoming a problem. And even then, things would spiral out of control. It happened once as I was going from the supermarket to my car. I didn't even know what made me snap. Suddenly, it was all just fire. I burned all my groceries and was left exposed in the parking lot, covered in ash and writhing in pain. It was a short enough burn for my nerves to stay, making me feel every boil and crack in the skin, blood and soot on the concrete. The most embarrassing time it happened was at work. I felt it coming, and I hid in the bathroom again. As the flames burst out, the fire alarm tripped. Sprinklers came on. I got a nasty burn, but not as bad as the other times. I could still walk out of there. I draped myself in a jacket and had to walk out in front of all of my coworkers, naked from the waist down and covered in boils. After that, I was put on paid leave while my treatment continued. We were going to work out an action plan with a therapist, but they had some trouble getting one that was accessible at this level of corporate secrecy. So while it dragged on, all I could do was wander around and try my best not to think of something that could burn my house down at a moment's notice. It was getting to me, and I suspect, to Sammy as well. One night, it happened in the bath. I had an awful dream which shook me right awake. The bathroom was pitch black. Despite my eyes being open, it was dark. That it spiraled into this thought of my eyes having fused shut. It pushed that first domino in my chest, and by the time I got out of the bath, I was on fire, casting crawling shadows along the walls. Sammy came running. She tried to help, but ended up burning her hands. I pushed her away, giving her another burn on her neck. I pulled myself into the bath and turned on the water. It's hard to do when you don't have any skin on your fingers. Blood is slippery, and the knobs in the shower can be a bit finicky. The fire alarm was going crazy, but Sammy managed to turn it off. Concerned neighbors came knocking at the door, and she had to turn them away with a bleeding neck and hands. And I just lay in the bath, watching the last embers on my skin disappear, putting me back in the soothing dark. I locked the door, begging for the night to be over. Things got complicated after that. Of course, Sammy didn't want to leave, but the bandages on her neck and hands broke my heart. The way she winced as she made herself a peanut butter jelly sandwich, the salt stinging her wounds. I lied to her and said the company was bringing over a live-in care provider. It wasn't completely untrue. It had been discussed, in passing. I waved goodbye to Sammy from the kitchen window. A cab drove off with her and I could finally relax. She was out of harm's way. My way. I tried to deal with my anxiety in other ways. I went out a lot. Booze helps a bit, especially if there's a lot of distractions. Live bands playing loud music, pretty girls waving their long hair around. Anything to get the finger in your mind away from the first domino that sends you spiraling into oblivion. I thought I could make something fun out of it. Once, when I got really drunk, I tried showing it as a party trick to a couple of barflies. They thought I was kidding around, that I was some kind of fire breather or something. So when I willingly set myself on fire, they were horrified. They didn't know about my treatment, so when the dark ink covered my skin, it looked like I'd been turned into coal. Their eager twisted as they ran screaming back into the bar. One of them called the police. Another fainted. They covered their noses, trying not to breathe in my fumes. I locked my knees into place, forcing my body to stay upright past the snapping musculature. My head dangled as my neck gave out. I fell face first into a puddle, but the treatment stopped me from suffocating. An inch of water, and it would have killed me. By the time a patrol arrived, I was long gone, leaving my tattered clothes in a black pile. I knew the roads well enough. I didn't care anymore. Coming home that night, I considered my options. I could keep going down this path, hoping something would change, or I could struggle and kick my way through a life lived on the precipice of pain. No matter what I did, there'd always be that fear brewing in the back of my mind, reminding me that I was never far away from the gates of my own hell. I sat on my balcony for a while, looking up at the stars. There was something beautiful there, a kinship. They burned too, but they hadn't known another life. Perhaps that was the way to go. The next day I took my car and drove into the desert. I parked and left a note. No valuables. I hid the keys under the front tire, stripped down, and put my clothes under the hood. There was no paint in them getting burned. I wanted a fresh pair when I got back. If I got back. Then I walked. I felt the sun on my skin, and I sensed the heat boiling at the edge of my mind. Come on, I muttered. Come on. I made myself think of it. I forced myself into it. I kicked myself down the black spiral in my mind and let the impressions take over. Come on, I begged. Get it over with. And when the flames came, I was relieved. I just let it happen. The fires burning my eyes shut and sucking the air out of my lungs. My body crackling and popping, breaking at the seams with every twist and turn. Your senses disappear. You can't scream. And with the treatment keeping me alive, I locked myself in a spiraling struggle as my body was repaired and burned over and over. Acrid flesh, ammonia, and burnt hair coming and going as my sense of smell circled. Flashes of light as my cornea struggled to remain. A violent tinnitus coming and going, like a breathing wave crashing into my skull. Never-ending pain, the kind of agony where a second turns into lifetimes. But it was too late. There was no one coming to save me. What had I done? You don't really taste anything. There might be little spots of blood leaving an impression of iron on your tongue, but it came and went. Same with touch. It would be pain or nothing. After a while, I stopped trying to breathe. I let my throat stay closed, and the treatment would keep me alive. I would feel my heart slowing, adapting, realizing that if I was calculated, I could make micro movements and bouts of muscular repair, meaning if I tried long enough, I could move, but only so slightly. I remember laying in the sand. The flashes of light were darker. It must have been night. I'd managed to move my hand straight into view so I could see my own fingers. There'd be darkness, a little light from the moon, a flash of clarity showing a coal-wrapped, skeletonized hand. Liquidized boiled fat staining the black sands around me. I tried to think, but even my brain was affected. There'd be long stretches of time where I sensed this gate in the back of my head, barring me from chasing any complicated thoughts. I couldn't remember my name. I could just think of something short and immediate, bursts of effort and strain. As my lungs came and went, I could think of sounds to make. Vowels, mostly. I settled on a couple that I found easy to repeat, just to remind myself that I was alive. E and O sounded particularly nice. E-O, E-O, E-O. As I couldn't see or hear anything, my mind started to fill in the blanks. The waves of painful screeching in my ears started to sound like voices and music. The flickering lights began to look like angels. I would have conversations with them and the pain would lull into a background noise. A nuisance at most. I'd have these presences sit down next to me. One had a voice like a beautiful piano, talking sonatas that would make me weep. Another would lie down next to me and wrap their arms around me, their breath on my neck like a soothing wind. They'd whisper of beautiful places and far-off lands, a beach where no one is alone, an island paradise where the sands are pink, a tree that reaches for the moon wanting to go home, little stories and melodies playing in the fire, begging me to stay. I could feel my needs melting away. When you're at the bottom of every sensation, there's no point in trying to look up. What's a glass of water when your world is on fire? What's a night of sleep when you are living in a nightmare? I let it all go, embracing the pain. It was so easy. After a while, I realized I could direct my efforts, like managing a switchboard. Keep the eyes off, I'd think. Keep the eyes and the ears off. Instead, I'd focus on the muscles, keeping me at intense pain levels but allowing me to move, to touch. I don't know if anyone saw me. I don't think they did. But if anyone had seen me, they'd have seen a charred body rise from the ashes facing the moon. I'd wander the sands, inviting the pain into the soles of my feet. I didn't care about stepping on branches or rocks. I'd feel the wind fanning the flames, fueling me like an engine. The more I moved, the more it hurt, and the more I could keep going. And as I moved, air would push into my lungs, leaving me with enough room to scream. And with that, I'd howl at the moon like a beast. E-O, E-O, E-O. Time would pass, and it wouldn't. Your days don't really start or end. It all just keeps going. What was real and what wasn't would be blurred, making me chase thoughts I didn't know I had. I'd make up words that even a burned mouth could say, borrowing meaning from whispers in the fire, words with depth and power that I'd forget in a second, or an hour. There was no way to tell. I would imagine other burning people walking alongside me. Sometimes I would see them dancing at the edge of my vision. Long, elegant movement with trails of smoke puffing into the sky. Little lights allowing themselves to burn out and die. I'd cry for them, laugh at them, and all the while I suffered, but that was normal. I'd fall to my knees and stay there smoldering, not moving an inch. I'd give in to the thoughts that trickled into sparks of consciousness, becoming a conduit to whatever spoke through me. Vowels trickling past broken teeth. A prayer, perhaps. My most vivid memory is that moment when I'm kneeling in the sand. Even with my eyes closed, I could tell I wasn't in our world anymore. I was in a world of fire, praying to an ocean of molten steel. Another dead man propped up to suffer. E-O, E-O, E-O. The burning angels would listen and dance. The ocean of pain would soothe me. There was no heat anymore. It was home. I'd finally reached the other side of the shore, where pain was life and being without it was agony. I'd adapted. I'd learned. I'd been perfected, and I came home. I opened my eyes. They'd follow me through. A dozen others, wielding the same black ink across their bodies. They'd adapted too. They'd been made tall and strong and mad. They'd wandered other worlds, exposed to other horrors, and they'd been made grateful just like me. Brothers, sisters, a family carved from agony and blisters. I'd go from ecstasy to ceaseless horror. I'd felt like time had stopped, and that I was settling into a strange eternity, one where complete inaction was the only logical thing to pursue. Turning myself static, I could feel what that first fire had felt, warming our ancestors. I was on the wrong side of life, looking out at those struggling. I was beyond them, but something in me was still too human to accept it. But I was getting there, and it was so comfortable. A life without worries means a life without drive. But is that such a bad thing? Then a drop of water. I didn't feel the first one, but as the rain gathered, the flames died. I'd been in pain so long that being without it made me sick. All those little systems of my body that I'd forgotten were cast away, coming back to me. Eyes, ears, taste. Each and every one more terrible than the other. I cried and begged the heavens to send me back, but I was forgetting the right words, and the broken spots in my brain were coming back to me. The heavens couldn't hear me, and I couldn't make them listen. I lay there for hours, hoping I would dream myself back to that other world where I belonged, but I'd lost it. My car had been towed. People had looked for me, but they hadn't found me. All in all, I figured I'd been gone for a couple of days at most. Turns out, it was 16 days in total. A lot of people thought I'd been kidnapped or killed, and for the second time in less than a year, Sammy would see me come back from the dead. The treatment was deemed too dangerous. They didn't specify why. Maybe the discussion with the therapist got a little out of hand when I started to talk about ink-covered angels. Or maybe it was my desire to put myself back on fire. Either way, they had a kill switch to deactivate the entire thing, and they used it. Made me cough up something akin to a metal glob. They put it on a metal tray and moved it to a liquid nitrogen container with a stylized blue sunflower logo. It was strange, looking at the treatment like a separate physical thing. It had been part of me, and losing it felt like removing a vestigial organ. I knew I should have felt different once it was off, but I didn't. I still had the same thoughts, the same problems, but now that I thought about the fires, I didn't know whether to long for them or cower in fear. Maybe both. At least I don't have to worry about hurting anyone. I was still on paid leave. I moved in with Sammy for a while just to get a change in environment. I met some new people and grounded myself a bit. It's so easy to lose sight of the little things when your mind is in 10 different places. Sometimes you don't need much to make your day. A pat on the shoulder, a cool drink after a long day. The little things can do wonders. I eventually made my way back home. I returned to the office. I got a new place that didn't have a bathtub. I started talking to people without shying away, and I'd keep my eyes on the traffic lights when I came to a full stop. I'd cross the line where pain didn't scare me anymore. When you have known what I know, everything else seems dull in comparison, and if push comes to shove, I've lived through the worst of it. I wouldn't mind seeing it again someday. This was years ago, and my life looks very different today. I'm engaged and I live in a new town, new job, same company. I got a dog. But even now, as all things lull into a new normality, I think of those days. On the darkest nights, I can picture those ink-covered beings out there, watching over me from afar, waiting for me to remember and come home. I fear I might still have a part of me stuck in that place, that someday I'll just snap. And I don't know what's worse, To be paralyzed by fear, or to long for it. Much like my cousin, I don't believe in hell. I don't think we can suffer forever. And sometimes when it rains, I long to burn. I've never been a squeamish person. You need to have a strong stomach in a profession like mine. 10 years as a physician will force you to see all kinds of things to keep you up at night. Third-degree burn victims with skin like rusted metal. Harlequin babies that won't live past 12 hours. And grown men sobbing after pulling the plug on their mother that their health insurance wouldn't cover to keep breathing. I've seen it all. Sometimes I wish I hadn't. And yet it was something so simple that broke me. It was a case you see every day. At least, that's how it started. I still remember it all so clearly. A man was rushed into the emergency room after losing control of his car and landing it squarely in a ditch. He had 3 fractured vertebrae in his spine, as well as a rib going directly into his heart. It was a miracle he was still breathing. It was standard procedure. We carted him in and immediately began blood transfusion and monitoring his heartbeats. He kept murmuring as we hooked him up to our equipment, so faintly, but you could almost make out, "Please, stop." At the time, I assumed it was shock getting to his head. Retrospect has such a cruel way of working the things you see when it's already too late. We were just about to begin an emergency thoracotomy to revolve the rip when he flatlined. We immediately got the defibrillators and began trying to resuscitate him. Clear. Clear. It was no use. His heart hadn't beaten in 10 minutes. He was dead. Was dead. And then something odd happened. His heart began beating again. It didn't make any sense. We hadn't used the defibrillators in the past 5 minutes. I didn't bother speculating on what restarted it. I was just happy to not lose a patient. As I walked beside him to transfer him for surgery, I saw tears had streamed down the man's face. At the time, I thought it was an involuntary reaction or a subconscious relief of surviving. I know better now. I couldn't let a miracle like this slip through my fingers. We carted him to surgery for the emergency thoracotomy. Those 2 hours are seared into my mind. The first incision made it clear something was terribly wrong. The smell, my God, the smell. It was like roadkill mixed with raw sewage that had been left out in the sun. Even through my mask it hit me like a freight train, filling the room like a blossoming spore. One of the other surgeons began dry heaving, and it took every ounce of strength in my body not to vomit. That should have been it. I should have just walked right out then. I don't know why I pushed through. Maybe some misplaced sense of duty. Whatever it was, it forced me to continue with the operation. The blood that came out of him was thick, like rotten molasses. The more we opened him up, the more unexplainable horrors we saw. His ribs, which by all means should have been broken, appeared to be in the process of healing. Actually, healing isn't the right word. It was more like regrowing. Thin blood vessels and bone marrow, peeking out like bot flies and skin, wiggling as if gasping for air. His lungs were filled with giant, calloid-covered wounds. It was as if someone had stabbed him over and over. Any hole this big should have killed him instantly, let alone 20 in each lung. And yet every single hole had been crushed shut with dried blood, as if they were nothing more than annoying scabs. Then veins around the scar tissue of each hole were black and green, clearly infected. The worst was his heart. Jesus, his heart. It was brown, rotten blood and mucus seeping through it like water through a towel, There were tendrils of tissue growing from the base of it around the broken rib, like the roots of a tree. It was as if the body had healed around it. Each tendril was throbbing, slowly burrowing into the bone, anchoring it in place. A silence fell over the room for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a minute or so. What? What am I looking at? The other surgeon's voice was shaking. I'd never heard him so scared before. Necrosis. This is not necrosis. I've seen necrosis. It doesn't turn your blood into syrup. The smell in the tissue as well as the discoloration indicates necrosed tissue and sepsis. We'll treat the sepsis and remove the dead tissue after we remove the obstruction. Necrosis from what? The rib has only been in there a few hours. There wasn't enough time for any of that tissue to die, let alone rot. And besides, look at his heart. He shouldn't even be breathing. We can speculate later, but right now our priorities are keeping this man alive. Scalpel. He handed me the scalpel, and I slowly began cutting the tendrils that had latched onto the bone. With every incision, a small hiss would emanate, screaming like a dying animal. It took hours, but we finally got the rib removed, along with some of the necrosed tissue. There was no way to get all of it out at once. There was no way to get it all out at all, actually. How were you supposed to remove 2 lungs and an entire heart and expect someone to live enough to perform a transplant? The best we could do was hook him up on some incredibly strong antibiotics and pray that worked until we came up with further treatment. That treatment never came. 2 nights after I sewed him shut, the man jumped out the window of his room. He was on the 11th floor, or in other words, roughly 110 feet above the ground. I wish I had stayed behind when we all ran to the parking lot that day. His body was writhing reddish-brown mess. Screams of what sounded like at least a dozen men emanated from the air, piercing the ears of everyone near it. His ribs stretched like millipede legs, scratching at the cement of the parking lot, trying desperately to get traction. His spine flailed like an unmanned watering hose. The worst part was the face. His head had been partially crushed from the impact, and his upper face was still mostly intact. His eye, ever so slightly pushed out of socket, looked at me, begging, pleading, praying to be put out of its misery. There was something else in there. Hate. Red-hot, boiling hatred for me. Me. My God, the way it looked at me. That bloodshot abyss poured into my soul, into my very being. I could practically hear it scolding me, screaming at me. You did this to me. You kept me alive. How dare you think you could do this to me? Look at me. Look at what you've done. I didn't even realize I was screaming till the police came. I don't really remember what happened after that. The sound and smell of it all is the only thing that sticks in my mind. Yelling, gunshots, crying, cursing, crunching, smoke, and then finally silence. I never saw the body get carted away. I couldn't bear to look at it again, any of it again. I resigned the next day and never looked back. I'm in therapy now, and from what I'm being told, I'm recovering quite well. The nightmares have stopped. I can sleep peacefully now. Almost. I see it all when I close my eyes. The blood, the bones, the torn skin, and that eye. That eye. No matter where I go, that eye will follow me, and I will always feel its gaze. It's hate. The cold metal ground hurt my back to lay on. God, I hate back pain. Wait, why was I sleeping on the ground? In fact, I don't actually know where I am or how I got here. Have I always been here? I have no memories before this exact moment, yet I felt my developed brain's instincts. I felt my consciousness. I felt my fear. I felt my loneliness, even though the sounds of functioning machinery suggested I was surrounded by people. Do they know how we got here? I stood up to see a small, unimpressive room filled with all kinds of equipment. None of the equipment appeared to have a point, yet several people worked mindlessly with no clear goal. The sound was unbearably loud and unendingly obnoxious. It's a wonder how I slept at all with the deafening industrial racket. I took in my surroundings the best I could, but the lighting was dull and there were no windows. It was neither hot nor cold. There were no clocks or ways to track time at all. I found myself at the back of the factory. Dude. A woman with grime coating her pale skin head to toe was shifting levers back and forth while dripping sweat. Start working. He's watching. She kept her voice lowered, but she raised a bony finger towards the cameras in the corner of the room. An unconvincing and cartoonish camera swiveled back and forth. I simply looked at the dirty worker, and I continued looking around without acknowledging the warning. I felt her scowl intensify as I walked away from her, but I couldn't find myself to care. As I wandered through the narrow paths, each person looked at me with different expressions, all of which were in different levels of anguish and frustration. It also seemed to be confusing to everyone I passed to see me not working alongside them. Without breaking the monotony of useless work, they watched me walk past them towards what I deemed to be the front of the factory. As I approached the wall opposite of the one I woke up near, I noticed a roped-off section that divided the room. Beyond the rope, a small group of men sat on the only chairs I've seen in the entire building. They looked content and very relaxed. That was until they saw my confused face. Upon seeing me, expressions twisted into anger. A fat little man squinted his eyes and turned a deep crimson as he spit. What the hell are you doing? Don't you know you're supposed to be working? No, not really, I answered honestly. The worker closest to me shot her head up to see who dared to speak back to the clique behind the rope. This guy. Another ghostly white man groaned. He's lucky we're not ripping hearts out anymore. Ripping our hearts? As the question escaped my lips, they chuckled at my ignorance. Yeah, kid, get back to work, another man hissed. So you aren't ripping out hearts now? Why should I work? I asked. Oh my God, you're still here? The fat man wailed in rage. If you don't do as we say, the boss will send you to the basement. Gasps from behind me suggested this isn't the first time they've threatened people with the supposed horrors of the basement. It, however, did not impress me. Who's the boss and what happens in the basement? Simply asking the questions seemed to make everyone in the room uncomfortable in different ways. The man behind the rope only got angry. My lack of blind allegiance baffled my peers as much as it did the men. The boss created all of this. Just like what you see here, there is also an upstairs and a downstairs. A voice explained just out of sight. The man speaking was so far behind the rope, he was covered in shadows. Everyone shut up to listen to him, so I concluded he was likely the highest authority in the room. If you don't work, the boss will send you to the basement to have your legs broken. Oh wow, that's messed up, I responded. No, he's the most loving guy in the entire factory. He made everything you see around you. the shadowy man corrected me. But you guys were ripping out hearts for him, I asked. Well, yeah, but his son used to work here. He let us rip his heart out after a few years so that we never have to do it again, he said, completely serious. We used this knife, and that's why we all hang a tiny golden knife around all our necks, he said, pulling the symbol out of his shirt. Wait, so the boss required you to rip out hearts. Then you worked with his son, and he allowed you to rip his out, and now you don't do it. Why the hell do you have to rip out hearts to begin with? And you think he's a cool guy? He is love. A demonic growl shook in his throat. And have any of you met this boss? I asked. He works upstairs, and you can only meet him once you're promoted. So you work for someone who you've never met. Then how do you know the factory worker was his son when you ripped out his heart? He was really nice, and he told me how awesome his dad was, the fat man chimed in. But none of you have been promoted, so how do you even know if he's even up there to begin with? I kept grilling because nothing made sense to me. The entire factory chose to follow a man they've never seen, and this group of men are acting as an authority for nothing more than a hypothesis. I saw the stairs that led up to a closed door, and I saw a set of stairs leading down to a destination unknown. All I saw was it descending into a dark nothingness. The shadow man pointed to the stairs. All people denying his authority go to the basement. No one has ever gone down there to find out how serious the boss can be. Okay, fine. Let's see the basement. Even louder gasps had the entire factory in shock. The men behind the rope froze. Never before has a person challenged the authenticity of their claims to this extent, for not even they have challenged them. Amongst the shock, smirks slowly replaced their faces. A cocky, cheek-to-cheek grin adorned the shadowy man's face as he approached the rope, yet his eyes remained in darkness. Right this way. Down to the basement I descended out of sight as laughter harmonized with the sound of my feet on each step. There was a complete absence of light, and it was very cold. After what seemed like ages, I made it to the landing. Without light, I had to feel the walls to make my way down the corridor. It was just a few feet in when I reached a dead end. There was nothing. No people, no equipment. Nothing. My lungs were burning by the time I made it back up the stairs. As the factory came back in sight, no one seemed to notice I had re-entered until I was midway up the stairs leading to the boss's office. Wait, no one's allowed to see the boss. Shadows no longer hid his face. He was nothing but a petrified child. Then break my legs, I said, and I twisted the knob and pushed. The door swung open easily, revealing the serene and peaceful nature of the world outside. Such awe-inspiring beauty and freedom was laying behind the doors the entire time. A world away from a factory that produced nothing, led by people exploiting baseless beliefs. And it was so much more impressive than any boss. It was especially more majestic than a system where the guy who required hearts to be ripped out was threatening to break your legs if you didn't adopt his law. Even with the knowledge they had, and the obvious moral corruption of their boss, they still choose to waste their time working for him without investigating his validity. I stepped out of the pit of useless despair and looked down at the men who should know better, and the poor people they led to believe they should never question the boss. Hey, see? You're all wrong and wasting your time, I yelled down to them. Silently they watched me stand above them, and the useless factory continued to roar. My friend Carla had a knack for giving you exactly what you needed, even if you didn't know it yourself. For my 26th birthday, we went to a nightclub. It had been an especially sunny day, not a single cloud in the sky. Still, she gave me a yellow umbrella that looked like it came from an antique shop. I thought it was ugly and absurd, especially since she knew I hated bright colors. But as we stepped outside, an unexpected downpour started, even though the forecast had promised clear skies. At Christmas, she gave me a gift card for a store. The very next day, a website glitched, offered all merchandise at 90% off. With the $50 on her card, I bought thousands of dollars worth of clothes. And that was nothing compared to her gift at her nephew Lucas's christening. She gave the baby a black cat, fully aware that the mother, her sister, was allergic. It all made sense 2 days later when the cat caught a huge rat crawling in through the baby's room ventilation. Apparently, the child had been having health issues related to infections, and thanks to the cat, they discovered the source and fixed it once and for all. Everyone in our group noticed those strange coincidences. We used to joke she was a witch. She'd just laugh and say it was luck, that her method was simple. She flipped a coin 3 times. She did it to decide which store to enter, what to buy, even what time to leave the house. If she got 3 heads, she went ahead. If not, she changed the plan. We always laughed at that, grateful for her gifts. But something changed this year. Yesterday was my birthday. The conversation was lively, the music loud. My cousin Valeria nailed it with her mimosas. My coworkers praised the snacks. My friend Juan told stories from his trip to the Amazon. Even though the party was a success, Carla looked uneasy. She sat in the corner of the couch with a glass full of wine, not speaking to anyone. That was unusual for her. She was normally outgoing and full of light. She kept glancing at the hallway, the window, the stairs, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear out of nowhere. I walked over and asked if everything was okay. She looked nervously at her gift, stacked with the others. She said she'd felt off all day, a tight anxiety in her chest. She couldn't explain it. Then she admitted it had something to do with her gift, that she was embarrassed about it. She leaned in, lips tight, and murmured, "Open it when everyone's gone, please." I was about to agree when my boyfriend shouted, "Open the presents! Open the presents!" The pressure from the group did the rest. Carla lowered her gaze. Her discomfort made me nervous. That afternoon, while we were setting up for the party, I'd felt something strange. Nothing specific, just a vague discomfort, like the air was heavier. At one point I could have sworn I saw a shadow move in the hallway as I passed the kitchen, but when I looked, nothing was there. I figured maybe it was the lights, or just my imagination. I shook my head and went back to prepping drinks and music. There was too much to focus on. I started opening presents. My friends had outdone themselves this year. One even gave me a ticket to see my favorite band. I saved Carla's box for last. It was rectangular and soft, with rounded edges, wrapped in yellow paper and a red ribbon. Attached was a note that read, "To Julian, may you have many more birthdays." Everyone waited eagerly, holding their breath, convinced it would be another example of her mysterious gift-giving. Slowly I tore open the yellow paper and opened the box. A carton of eggs. The silence was suffocating. 12 white eggs. No one knew what to say, until my boyfriend let out a nervous laugh. Soon everyone burst into laughter. I laughed with them and joked, "Looks like your gift-giving powers are running low." Carla held my gaze and smiled, but her eyes remained uneasy. "It's what you need," she said quietly. "The coin said so." That phrase unsettled me more than it should have. I drank too much that night. We went to bed without cleaning up. We didn't realize we'd left Carla's gift on the kitchen floor. A seemingly insignificant detail. Until now. I'm standing outside my house watching the police carry out a body. Solomon Garcia. The serial killer who had terrorized the city for a year. He would hide in his victim's home for 30 days before murdering them in their sleep. It was going to be our turn, but this time he didn't get the chance. He slipped in the kitchen. His head slammed into the countertop, dead on impact. Beside him, the crushed carton of eggs. I imagine him entering my kitchen, the crunch of eggs underfoot, and then a dull thud. Flesh against concrete, his limp body on the white tile floor, life slipping away. The thought makes me sick. The police keep asking if I'd noticed anything strange. Unusual noises, missing food, how long since I'd checked the guest room closet. That's where they found a calendar, 30 days marked off. My stomach churns as they question me. I can't stop thinking about Carla, about her nervous look, about the coin falling once, twice, 3 times into her palm. How did she know? Did she suspect something? Am I really still alive thanks only to chance? To something as arbitrary and fragile as luck? What if I hadn't opened her gift that night? What if she had felt too ashamed to give it to me, or even to come to the party? A cold breeze runs down my spine, but one thing's for sure. I'll always gladly accept any gift from Carla. Whatever it is. I always double-check the lock on our apartment door. Not because I'm paranoid. Well, maybe a little, but because it's a strange mechanism. You can't just turn a key and walk away. You have to twist the handle to the right, then lock it. If it's twisted left, it stays locked. If it's straight, the door opens. Simple in theory, but easy to mess up. I live with my younger sister, Al, in a 2-bedroom apartment. The hallway from my front door is long. Her room comes first, then mine. Neither of us can see the entry or living room from our beds. The building's relatively secure, but I've read enough late-night Reddit rabbit holes to know that safety is sometimes just an illusion. And if we're being honest, I'd be an easy target. I'm clumsy, always carrying something, too trusting. Not exactly trained for fight or flight, but we'll unpack my weaknesses another day. It was a normal night, around 9:30 p.m. I crawled into bed, got cozy, and asked Al to check the door. She mumbled something like, "Yup," from her room. Good enough for me. I fell asleep. At about 12:30 a.m. I woke up. The wind outside was howling. The blinds were smacking the window like they were trying to escape. I groaned, got up, shut the window, and slid back under the blanket. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not from outside, from inside the apartment. They were near my door. Quiet, cautious. Then they moved off, toward the living room. My heart began to pound. I straightened to listen. Maybe it was Al. But then I heard it. Chewing. Not soft, regular chewing. This was wet, rapid, almost animal-like. The kind of sound a squirrel makes when it finds something tough to crack. Smack, smack, click, gnaw. Pauses in between, followed by sudden bursts of messy, frantic bites. I couldn't move, couldn't even swallow. Then came the familiar creak of the sofa. Something, or someone, had sat down. I listened harder, barely breathing. A faint tap, tap, tap followed, like someone swinging their legs, kicking playfully against the couch frame. Rhythmic, casual, like they were waiting for something. My skin crawled. If someone had broken in, they would have passed my sister's room first. Was she okay? I needed to get to her, but the thought of stepping into that hallway, with whatever that was just meters away, made my body lock up in panic. Then the chewing stopped and the footsteps came back. This time they were heading to my door. Each step was deliberate, heavy but slow. The kind of walk that says, I know exactly where you are. I had to think fast. There was a smart lamp in the living room I could control from my phone. Shaking, I reached over and opened the app. I turned the lamp on, bright white, then blue, then red. Flicker, flicker. Distraction. Please work. The footsteps paused. Then they turned around back to the living room. I didn't wait. I slipped out of my room and crept into Al's. Her door was closed, but I eased it open with shaking hands. She was there, sleeping soundly. I rushed to her side and shook her gently but urgently. Get up. We need to go. Quietly. She blinked, still groggy, but something in my face made her nod. Together we crawled to the hallway. I could still hear faint movement in the living room. Shuffling, shifting. We held our breath. Then, it noticed. The footsteps stopped, and then came the sprint. It charged. The footsteps thundered toward us with a speed that didn't feel human. We screamed. I yanked open the front door and we tore down the hallway toward the elevators. One was already waiting. We jumped in, slammed the ground button, and the doors began to close. And then, just as they were about to shut, I made the mistake of looking back. Standing in the hallway was someone who looked just like me, except half her face was wrapped in gauze, stained dark with fresh blood. Her head tilted, slightly too far, her arm lifted, elbow bent at the wrong angle, like a puppet trying to mimic something it didn't understand. And then, she smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to show she knew I was watching. The doors closed. We got outside and called the police. What followed was a blur. Questions, searches, officers walking through our apartment with flashlights. They found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of tampering, nothing out of place. They said maybe we were dreaming, maybe we imagined it. Maybe stress had gotten to us. But I know what I saw, and one thing has kept me up ever since. Even in the chaos of getting out, I remember looking at the lock. It was still turned to the left, which means the door had been locked the entire time. So how did she get in? And worse, what if she never left? I never thought I'd come online for advice, especially about something like this. I'm used to having all the answers, or at least I'm good at pretending I do. You see, I write an advice column for a small town paper. If anyone could sort this out, it should be me. That's what makes the situation feel even more hopeless. This is the part where I'm supposed to say I know how crazy it sounds. I don't. I know how it reads. I know how you're probably tilting your head right now. Skeptical, but curious. The way I do when I get letters from my column about cheating husbands or truant kids. Despite never fully knowing what I was doing, I always had the language to make others think I did. But I don't have language for this. I just have him. Let me back up. My son is 8. Was 8. I don't know anymore. We were at the park for a playgroup thing. Other moms, other kids. Same place we'd gone every month since he was 3. Wood chips, a few slides. Patch of woods we always said was too thin to get lost in. He was playing hide and seek. He was always good at that. Almost too good. Clever in a way that made you worry what he'd grow into. I remember someone joking, "He's either gonna be a world leader or a criminal mastermind." They started calling his name. "You won, come on out." But he didn't. They kept calling, and something inside me shifted, like a lost, ancient instinct we outgrew centuries ago, like a sixth sense I didn't know I had. I don't remember most of the day, not in order, just pieces. My phone slipping out of my shaking hands when I tried to call 911, my knees hitting the dirt, a ranger saying the words, "No sign of a struggle," like that was supposed to help. They found nothing, no footprints, no fibers, no blood, just nothing. The search lasted 2 weeks, 14 days of reporters, canine units, and whispers behind hands. 14 nights of dreaming about body bags and waking up to check his room. I kept the door open, like I expected him to just appear again, curled up in his sheets, annoyed I was making a fuss. And during that time, I became a shell of a person, voice raw from screaming his name, feet numb from chasing shadows, and eyes dry with no tears left. If you never lost a child, I don't think it's a feeling you can put into words. The regret, the devastation, the anger, the emptiness, the fear, the agonizing, burning self-hatred. You can try to sympathize, you can try to understand, but you never will. 2 weeks later, I got a call at 3:12 a.m. They'd found him walking along a logging road 6 miles from the park. He was cold, disoriented, but alive. When I saw him at the station, I melted, just dropped. My body shut down with relief. I hugged him and he let me, but he didn't hug back. He was in shock. I knew that. The officer said as much. This would take some time. The first night back, he slept in my bed. I watched him breathe like it was the most fragile thing in the world, holding his little body in my arms. I remember whispering, "I'll never let you go, ever again." I meant it then. Now I'm not sure who I brought home. It's little things. That's how it always starts, right? Little things you tell yourself not to notice. He doesn't remember where he was. That's what they told me to expect. Trauma, amnesia, some protective thing the brain does. But it's not just that he forgot. It's that he doesn't seem to think there's anything to remember. He stares at me blankly when I ask. Not confused, not scared. Just blank. Like the questions in a language he never learned. He struggles with showering, getting dressed, anything that involves changing clothes. I had to compromise by letting him shower in his underwear, or else he won't even touch the water. He walks like he's copying someone, every step a second behind. He hums to himself now, but not songs I recognize. Just slow, disjointed notes out of tune. It's been weeks and these new habits still haven't went away. He calls me Mom, but it doesn't sound right. Like the shape of the word is right, but the soul of it is missing. Like hearing your name from a stranger pretending to know you. Last night I caught him standing in the hallway, not moving, just standing, staring at the wall like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Making sure no one's here." I laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't funny. It just short-circuited my brain. I told his therapist. I was careful. I said I thought the trauma had changed him, that he seemed different. She said that was normal, that kids process fear in strange ways. I nodded and pretended to agree. Then I went home and locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life. He eats less now, sleeps less. I think he even blinks less. I've checked his body for marks, scars, anything. I don't even know what I'm looking for. Some proof that what I feel isn't just panic unraveling me from the inside out. But everything's where it should be. Same cowlick, same chipped front tooth, same tiny freckle behind his left ear. But I know that's not my son. It's not a dream. It's not paranoia. It's not some post-trauma spiral. It's something else, and I don't know what to do. If anyone's been through this, if anyone's ever felt this, please say something. Tell me I'm wrong, or tell me I'm not. The internet is filled with stories about people who clip out of reality and into somewhere else. Terms like backrooms, states, woods are common on Reddit, and I'm not here to argue semantics with you. I call them fairy pockets. But even that is just a term I made up, so use what you like. There are no word police, not that I have found yet. There are no set rules by which one enters a fairy pocket. Sometimes you just slip in by accident, though there's usually an easy way out, if you know what to look for. Something that will just not look right, and help you pull yourself back to reality. It's hard to explain. My job is that I find them, go into them, and figure out what, if anything, is valuable there, and then sell all information to governments or private businesses. You would be shocked at the amount of natural resources some of these places hold. I can assure you that the Iraq War was not about oil without a shadow of a doubt, but they're always dangerous, so it's a tough call on whether or not they're worth it, and thank God, not mine to make. Usually you can find some idiots willing to buy your dangerous claim for at least enough to break even, unless it's Rockport. Nobody even tries to claim that godforsaken place anymore. Today, I'm just going to tell you about a few places I found, and then, if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them. So without further ado, let's start with Pittsburgh's Infinite City. There is this one place in downtown Pittsburgh, about 2 blocks from the old US Steel building, where if you follow a complicated set of turns and steps, which I can't disclose due to an NDA, you will find yourself in a near-endless, entirely abandoned cityscape of almost identical brick tenements. It, as far as I could tell, served no real practical use to the people I sold it to, but mine is not to reason why. They paid well, and I don't question money on general principle. That said, the thing that struck me as most strange about this place wasn't how empty it was or who built it, being a total mystery. I always have assumed something built these places. No, the strangest part of this was that every single turn, or any other piece of writing I could find in this city, was written in what I eventually identified as a 14th century dialect of Polish. That's a nice and simple one. Not really scary, though I confess, all those empty buildings did get eerie, but most of the things I find are like that. A little off-putting perhaps, but not anything special. And this memoir is dedicated more to my horrific experiences after all. They're the ones that make for good stories. Now, some places like that feel creepy, but are fine. Others, like what we'll talk about next, feel fine but are potentially dangerous. If you've ever taken a road trip through Kansas, you'll know how flat it is, but perhaps one or two of you, while driving, have thought you saw a mountain way off in the distance. You probably stopped and shook your head, maybe rubbed your eyes, and it was gone. Good, it doesn't exist, and it can't hurt you. Unless you drive exactly 4 miles over the speed limit for 20 minutes while staring at the mountain, then take a sharp left onto a dirt road between 2 cornfields, with a wooden sign on an archway over it. The sign may or may not say anything. That tends to change for some reason. The dirt farm road will soon turn into a paved highway, and you will be in Hanscom County. It's a nice place if you don't mind the smell of sulfur. It's a geothermal hotspot, and the entire place stinks of eggs. The locals are nice, hard-working folks who will give you the shirt off their back, and really are fine people. But take my advice and don't go to any of the churches in the county. They all have the same preacher who tells the same sermon every week, like a recording. And the people can get violent if you ever looked bored during it. Other than that, it's a great place to live, with property values that can't be beat, on account of the fact that I am fairly certain it's still 1973 there. A few hundred miles away, there's one place in the Midwest. Again, for legal reasons, I can't tell exactly how to find. What I can tell is that it's a small regional airport in a big-ish city. That's all I can say. The vending machines all sell products that aren't in business anymore, but I am not entirely sure if that's supernatural or just some strange gimmick on the part of the airport management. What is weird is that if you walk into one specific women's bathroom on a Tuesday, there will be an elevator at the far end of the room past the last sink. It takes you up through 99 floors, 98 of which are identical open-plan office space. You cannot see the skyscraper from outside the airport, and actually, some planes fly right through where it should be. Every floor is the same, laid out in long rows of desks with big box computers, and off-white landline phones with wood grain siding. Each station manned by workers dressed in business casual, talking on phones and generally doing what you'd expect from a call center. The only issue is that they are speaking exclusively in dead languages. Latin, Proto-Finnic, Occitan. I even heard some Akkadian when I was there. Honestly, it's the most well-managed office I've ever seen. Everyone works hard, and nothing ever goes majorly missing, which I suspect has something to do with the fact, as far as I could tell, there were no managers to screw things up. I went up to floor 99, but decided against floor 100. You see, 99 was a waiting room like you'd find at a doctor's office, and to access floor 100, you had to take the stairs. The sounds coming from up there cannot be described, and I do mean cannot. I have tried repeatedly, and it only leads to my having a seizure. Not wanting to repeat that, I will leave them to your imagination. A buddy of mine who is a priest suggested that I found purgatory, and perhaps he was right. I'm no theologian, so I'll leave that one to the church. There is an area in San Francisco where you can see what I think is Atlantis, where Alcatraz should be, but I haven't figured out how to get there yet. And there is a way to get to the moon from Houston without NASA being involved. But by far the weirdest fairy pocket I ever found was Mount Prince Nelson National Park in West Virginia. It's a beautiful place, by the way. Wonderful hiking, and some absolutely stunning views of the mountains. But I don't recommend you take your kids. It's by far the most dangerous place I have ever been, and I lived in Chicago for 3 months. Long story, I was trying to figure out where all the damned clowns kept coming from. But I digress. Mount Prince Nelson is about 700 square miles, located within an area of West Virginia, no larger than a Walmart parking lot, which coincidentally is how you get there. Follow the steps correctly, and where the main doors are, a stone arch will appear with an NPS ranger who charges you 42 cents as an entry fee, and hands you a waiver to sign in the reasonably likely event that you die in the park. There are miles and miles of roads, both paved and unpaved, and a core area around a lake that contains the majority of the tourist stuff. It's more or less safe on account of the National Park Service maintaining a round-the-clock watch on the perimeter. That would make the Marines look sloppy, and the flight of F-14 Eagle fighter jets flying 24/7. Hot laps around the area is a great comfort, but we weren't paid to be comfortable, and our bosses wanted us deeper in the park and off trail. once you get outside of the patrolled area, like we were, things take a turn. Everything, and I do mean everything, wants to kill you. There are beetles, the size of cars, for starters. The cool parts, however, is the dinosaurs that roam free in the park. Side note, that whole "they can't see you if you don't move" thing is bull. Ask me how I know. It's a rainforest, so the backwoods camping isn't easy, because hacking your way off trail is a nightmare even without the venomous trees and psychic frogs. But I have to say, it really is beautiful. Puts Yellowstone to shame on a bad day, and that's saying it mildly. When I first went to Mount Prince Nelson, I was part of a team of specialists called in by the National Park Service to figure out why they kept getting paperwork from their employees there despite no knowledge of it existing. We spent about 6 months figuring out how to get in, and that's when things started to go badly wrong. Our team lead, an older guy named Donald, was the first to die. He had taken watch around our camp on the first nights after we left the safe zone, and some kind of big ape-looking thing came out of the woods and attacked. Beat poor Danny half to death before we were able to kill it, and he was dead by the time we got him back to a ranger station for a medevac. We had a job to do, and the pay was good, so we pushed on, deeper into the woods, where the 9 surviving men of our team got knocked down to 5 on the 3rd day by some kind of screaming fog. Though all things considered, it wasn't so bad, as it also killed the T-Rex that was chasing us. Jacoby, one of the newbies, went nuts that night and started talking about how he had communed with a goddess at the center of the mountain in his sleep, and that he needed to go out and join her amidst the rocks lest all reality be consumed. I had to put him down with my 45 before the crazy spread to the rest of the team, which might be my least favorite part of this job. The remaining 4 of us found an old cabin nearby and decided to hold up for the night. By the next morning, we were down to 3. I hadn't gotten to Jacoby in time, I guess. We reached the decision that we were going to try and make our way back to the safe zone after a short debate. I always try to be democratic where possible, so we started back. When we had been walking for around 7 hours, Rodriguez, who was on point, signaled a halt. He said he thought he had heard a twig break about 100 yards to our right. He was right, to worse luck. If he hadn't stopped, maybe he wouldn't have been able to line up his shot. The arrow took Rodriguez in the chest, sending him to the ground. Me and O'Leary opened up with our weapons in the direction of the archer, but I don't think we hit him. Rodriguez would have survived had the arrow not been poisoned, but he was already turning green and bleeding from his eyes by the time I got the bandage over the wound. I gave him last rites by sticking a stake through his heart and zip-tying a cross to his right hand so he wouldn't come back as anything unnatural. Then the 2 of us left and set off again in the direction of home. O'Leary and I made it a long way that day without stopping, and ended up coming close enough to the safe zone that we were fairly confident in making it there the next day. I took first watch and chewed coffee grounds to stay awake, as I had no doubts that we were still being hunted. The attack came sometime around 0:30, when I got a feeling on the back of my neck that I was being watched. I have learned to listen to these feelings, and it's why I'm still alive. Diving for the ground, the arrow just narrowly missed me, slamming into a tree a few yards behind. O'Leary was awake now and scrambling for his rifle, while I fired blindly into the trees from cover. We were unlikely to make it back without getting rid of this hunter, so I signaled for him to cover me as I crawled away from our camp. It took about 10 minutes or so before I found his tracks. 2 muddy boot prints and a Snickers wrapper gave away where he had been standing, and a trail of greenish-blue blood leading away from the spot told me one of us had hit him. O'Leary and I stalked him for about half a mile before we found him collapsed by a creek bed, panting heavily, a handsome young man dressed in bright orange hunting gear. The only sign he wasn't human was the metallic red hair and his almost neon green eyes. He cussed me out in what must have been an early ancestor of Welsh, before O'Leary blew his brains all over the forest floor. I wasn't sure that would stop him for long, so just to be safe, I hogtied him before we left. O'Leary quit this job after we made it back to civilization. I can't blame him. The last I heard, he had become a Buddhist monk and lived up some mountain in Colorado. I just hoped it wasn't anywhere near Rockport. That is one pocket that even I won't go to. But the pay from the National Park Service was more than enough for me to retire on, had I wanted to. So there are certainly perks to this job. Why do I still do it? I would love to get philosophical, but frankly, I just like it. It tickles the part of the human spirit that first pushed man to sail across oceans or fly to the moon. And like those great explorers of the past, I'm not sure I could stop even if I wanted to. It has its hooks in me and won't let go. I have other stories, of course, might even post them later, but these were a few that stood out to me. I will try to answer any questions, but given the number of NDAs and ancient blood oaths I've had to sign over the years, I make no promises about how much I can deliver. That said, if this job sounds fun to you, or the money sounds like a great way to get rich quick, I really do not recommend you take it up. People like that don't tend to last long, and for the love of all that is holy, if you are in Colorado and see a sign for a town called Rockport, turn around. Has anyone stayed at 237 Stillwater Road? I clean Airbnbs for a living. I've been doing it for about 2 years now, and have recently started my own cleaning company. I used to work for a larger management company, but had some difficulties with my boss and the way the business was run. So I quit and started managing a couple on my own. It doesn't pay too much, but I get to work on my own time and I'm my own boss. A large majority of the Airbnbs I clean are mom and pop operations, and since they don't have the time to do it themselves, they pay me to tidy up between guests. Most of the properties are left relatively clean, but every once in a while we get crappy clients that will trash the place for a party, or God knows what else. The worst I've had to do is scrub dried puke or throw away the occasional used condom, but it's worth it to be my own boss. I do most of my business through Craigslist, advertising my cleaning services to anyone in the area who may need help with their place. About a month ago, someone replied to my listing with nothing but the address of their property, the amount I could expect to be paid, and the first date it required cleaning. 237 Stillwater Road, $125, June 24th, 12 p.m. Although this may seem strange to someone new or unfamiliar with the business, it's fairly common for messages from the host to be this simple. It was part of the reason I enjoyed the job. I've never been a people person, so I enjoyed the simplicity of the limited interaction I had with people. I responded saying I could take the job, and didn't give it a second thought. The rental looked run down from the outside, in desperate need of a paint job to replace the peeling white paint on the exterior. The rotting and curled shingles only exacerbated the weary look of the house. Nestled on the top of a steep hill, it overlooked the vast and deep Stillwater Lake, which coincidentally harbored a few of the other houses I maintained. It was one story with an unfinished basement, indicated by the concrete foundation and the windows peeking just over the grass. However, the inside was a different story. The moment I stepped in, something felt off. Not wrong exactly, just too clean. Walking through the house, I found 2 fully furnished bedrooms, a kitchen, An attached garage converted into a game room, and a couple of doors I assumed led to closets. It was as if it had not been touched in weeks. I absently noted this as strange, as the listing said that the previous occupant had left no less than 2 hours ago. Walking through the house, not a single pillow or sheet in the bedrooms looked to be disturbed. No dishes sat in the sink waiting to be scrubbed. No crumbs or dirt dotted the carpet or stained wood floor. It's not uncommon for occupants to clean up the rental in order to avoid a large cleaning fee, but I'd never seen a rental this sterile. However, I pride myself on being thorough, and decided to replace the sheets as well as vacuum the floors just to be safe. Upon getting to the kitchen, I noticed a door in the corner I did not previously register. Stuck to the door was another detail I must have passed over on the initial walkthrough. A pinned note displayed a simple request written in neat handwriting. Replace salt in water softener. Through the door was a dark stairway leading into the basement. A lot of these old rentals had me do this as part of the routine. It was a menial task, but was inconvenient enough for me to often forget about, as they were usually out of the way, in basements or garages or other places that I rarely had any reason to go. Forgetting was generally not a big deal though, as these salt-dependent water softeners can often go weeks without being replenished. Since it was the first time I had cleaned this rental, and the owner had explicitly asked for it, I decided to not take the chance that it could wait. About halfway down the stairs, I realized that the light from the open kitchen door was failing. I turned around to realize that the door was shutting, and raced to the top of the steps. My initial panic was met with the realization that the door was simply on old hinges, and naturally closes on its own. A cold shiver ran up my spine as I understood that both the descent and ascent would have to be made in complete darkness. I'd never been afraid of the dark, basements, or anything like that, but there was something unsettling about being alone in an unfamiliar house, one that had hosted countless strangers, owned by someone I'd only exchanged a few brief messages with. It left me more uneasy than I could ever remember feeling. Still, I told myself this was something I had to do. Making it down to the hanging chain attached to the bulb was no big deal. A swift walk down the stairs and I could easily make out the chain before the door fully closed. I'd bet that even a relaxed walk could allow me to pull it in time, but that was not something I had the nerve to test. The basement of the rental was the stereotypical Midwestern unfinished basement. Concrete floors and exposed wooden beams. It reminded me of my childhood home. I was greeted by the pungent mildew smell, the damp and suffocating odor, considerably stronger than the average basement. The singular light bulb swayed on its chain, casting strange, long shadows around the room. A negligible amount of light was filtered through the grimy windows, haphazardly covered with cardboard, illuminating dust motes with their weak beams. There was old junk lining the walls of most of the basement on shelves or in boxes, undoubtedly the source of the musty smell. The water softener was tucked into one of the four corners, nestled between the washer and dryer. The salt in the water softener was completely empty. Typically, it takes about a month or a 4-person family to go through the salt if it is fully filled. Either the salt hadn't been replaced in about a month, if it was full to begin with, or this rental somehow uses an almost impossible amount of water. Puzzled, but eager to get out of the basement, I poured one of the salt bags stacked against the side of the water softener and into the maw of the machine. As I turned to leave, I noticed a peculiarity under the stairs. A circular dark spot resembling water damage was situated between the wooden supports holding up the flight. As I approached it curiously, I realized it was not simply a black spot, but a damp and yawning opening, stretching an indiscernible distance into the foundation of the house. The jagged rim bore evidence of man-made tools, likely a primitive and homemade well due to the antiquity of the house. Whatever cavernous depths the well reached into was hidden from the light of the singular bulb. I grabbed a loose pebble from the crude concrete floor and dropped it into the mouth. I waited for the response, and received none. I contemplated leaving the basement light on and calling it a day, but it was my first time cleaning this rental, and I was determined to leave no trace of the presence. Additionally, there was the possibility that the occupants would not find the light and turn it off, and the thought of having to replace the burnt-out bulb in the complete darkness made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath and tugged the chain down, plunging myself into complete darkness. As I did so, the sound of the pebble echoed back, winding tortuously and intoxicatingly from the back throat of the well. I still have the scar from running up the stairs. I told myself I wouldn't sprint, but as soon as I yanked the cord of the bulb, a fear I haven't felt since childhood swept over me. My mind conjured forms in the darkness behind me, fangs and nails scraping the air furiously inches away from my calves as I launched myself up the stairs, their shape changing from every step. I yelped as my foot caught on one of the steps and as my knee connected with the stairs, radiating a sharp pain out from my kneecap. I scrambled to get myself up, wincing at the sharp pain, and clambered up the remaining steps. I half expected the door to be locked when I made it to the small landing at the crest of the stairs, and let out a relieved sigh as I collapsed through the doors into the kitchen. The shapes in my mind evaporated at the presence of the dying summer light pouring in through the kitchen windows. I let my face blush with the shame of the last 10 seconds, but another part of me insisted that my fear was justified. Attempting to shake this feeling off, I did my final walkthrough of the house. By now the adrenaline had worn off, and my leg throbbed with the memory of my tumble. After I was sure everything was up to my standards, I bolted the front door, limped out to my car, and drove off. I have been cleaning this rental for just over a month now. Every time is the same. The house is immaculate when I arrive. There is a new note on the door to the basement, written in the same handwriting, but written on a different sticky note or with slight variations in the print. The water softener is always empty, and I always dump salt to the fill line. For each bag of salt I go through, a new bag replaces the one I have used up the next time I show up. I have now ceased cleaning the rest of the rental. I exclusively replace the salt and ponder over the well. The well has become a source of morbid fascination for me. Sometimes I stare into the fissure for what seems like hours, only to return from the trance and realize barely a minute has passed. I continue to drop pebbles, waiting in almost erotic anticipation for the distant echo. A single thing varies, though. I am more terrified of the basement each time I go. The shapes are closer. Sometimes I think I feel them brush my shirt or pant leg when I run up the stairs in the dark. Maybe I do. I've started to bring a flashlight on my daily trip into the basement, but this does little to reduce the thoughts in the back of my mind. I bring it regardless, as it's better than nothing. This notion of something else being in the room with me has started to follow me throughout the house. At first I felt it only when I was in the basement. Then I felt it in the kitchen. Now I feel it when I enter the house. I have cleaned it every day since the first day. Every night the owner will contact me with the address of the rental, the amount I can expect to be paid, tomorrow's date, and the time they expect me to clean it. I have never seen anyone staying there, nor any evidence of inhabitants within the house. But the house is always clean. I have never dusted, but no dust accumulates on the untouched furniture or shelves. No indentations on the couch where someone might have recently sat. The dishes are always in the same spot, none left out in the sink for me to clean. I have never even seen a car sitting in the driveway, or a light on while simply passing by. There is something off about the reviews of this rental online. It is almost as if they are AI generated. They follow a very formulaic structure, with many of them sharing many phrases like, feels like home, or we look forward to staying again. All of them are 5 stars, and not a single one says anything critical about the property. The incessant mystery has festered in me like a wound, bringing me to yesterday's events. I stood under the light bulb, its dangling chain in my right hand, my flashlight heavy in my left. I inhaled deeply, pulled my right hand down, and plunged the room into utter darkness. My clammy hands fumbled to find the button, illuminating the well upon its location. I cautiously approached the pit, angling my flashlight down its gullet. Though apparently graded for military use, the beam from the flashlight was swallowed eagerly by the pit's ebony gloom. I waited. In the lack of visual or auditory input, the brain tends to make its own stimulus, so when I saw a faint reflection at the edge of the flashlight's reach, I thought it was simply this phenomena in action. The reflection continued to expand, shimmering as it grew in intensity, so much so that I was almost convinced that the flashlight's reach had somehow been extended to whatever depths the water table lay at. The reflections grew in their intensity, and with a terrifying beauty I can't begin to describe, I realized that the light cast back wasn't of that of water. It was that of innumerable eyes. My blood ran cold, and I watched in detached horror as my flashlight tumbled into the inky darkness. Consciousness returned. After how long, I am still not sure. I ran panicked through the darkness towards where I assumed the staircase was. I fumbled around and located the cool banister, using it to propel myself up the stairs. On the 5th step, the decaying wood gave way, robbing me of my momentum. I caught myself with the assistance of the railing, but upon attempting to pull myself up, the 2 ends of the broken board snared my right leg, tearing at the skin on my ankle. I tried to pull myself out of the stairs, which only served to push the splintered step further into my leg. Gritting my teeth and rotating my body, I felt for the cracked wood. My finger brushed a jagged edge, pain shooting up my arm as a splinter slid under my fingernail. A carrion, rotting smell suffocated me. I gagged. With my left leg and my remaining strength, I kicked a side of the board with panicked fervor. The first kick only served to drive the splintered wood further into my tender flesh. I was certain that this is how it would end. The second did the same, but I could feel the rotted wood giving way. Adrenaline surged, dulling the pain into something distant and unreal. On the third, the board snapped. I was free. I clumsily pulled myself along on my stomach. Reaching the crest, I fumbled for the doorknob and threw the door open. If God is merciful, then it will someday relieve me of the horrid sight that dying light illuminated. Scores of them line the staircase, their limp-like bodies twisting and convulsing in an attempt to escape the soft glow of the sun. Their skin spread thin and pale over their bony bodies, revealing twisted and purple varicose veins over their ape-like bodies. The horde clawed over each other, tearing flesh from their leprous bodies and spilling their ichor in a deafening silence. They oozed and slithered down the stairwell, indeterminable in their numbers, but an amalgamation of claws, fangs, and atrophied wings. In places, skin bubbled and burst, emitting a foul and indescribable stench. As the last of the monstrosities vanished into their antediluvian crypt, they left behind only the shattered stair and the trail of blood marking my escape. Although I struggle to recall what followed, they say a good Samaritan found me, babbling, incoherent. I was taken to a nearby hospital, where I've remained ever since. Despite my insistence, the doctors claim there's no rental listing for 237 Stillwater Road, just a long abandoned house. But I know the truth. I know what I saw. Periodically I still hear it, the sweet, distant echo rising from the well, calling me back. I know I will return, and when I do, I will know just how deep the well goes. I moved into this house a week ago. Nothing special, just a one-bedroom with scuffed floors, peeling paint, and a draft that whispered through the cracks when the wind picked up. Rent was cheap and I didn't ask questions. I couldn't afford to. The first few days were fine, dusty, quiet, maybe too quiet. I slept like crap, but that wasn't new. I figured it was just the usual insomnia, or the leftover anxiety still chewing at my gut after months of couch hopping. But then something shifted. At first it was just a feeling, that subtle itch between your shoulder blades, like someone's watching you, but you're alone. I'd walk into the kitchen and feel eyes on my back, turn off the bathroom light and feel like I had to run to the bedroom. Silly stuff. Childhood fears. I told myself I was adjusting. But a few nights ago, something happened I can't explain. I was lying on the couch late at night, TV on mute. The only light in the room came from the screen and the bulb behind me in the hallway. I'd left it on without thinking. Something about the dark in this place felt too heavy. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something peeking around the edge of the hallway door. Two eyes, low to the ground, pale, wide, unblinking. They vanished the second I turned to look. Just gone. Like they'd never been there at all. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe a reflection. Maybe I was just tired. But I couldn't shake the image. Those eyes, there was something off about them. Not wrong in an obvious way, just enough to make my stomach knot. They didn't blink, didn't shift, just stared like they were trying to memorize me. 3 nights ago, I tried to take a shower. I'd just stepped under the water, curtain only half drawn, because even then, something about closing it all the way made me uneasy. I wasn't thinking about that though. I was rinsing shampoo from my hair, eyes stinging. When I opened them, I saw a part of a face peeking through the edge of the curtain. Just a sliver, pale skin, a sharp cheekbone, half an eye, too wide and too still. It was just standing there watching me. No sound, no movement, just there. I froze, heartbeat in my throat. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stared. And then slowly it slid back out of view. Gone. Like it had just wanted me to know it could get that close. I haven't been in that bathroom since. I taped the door shut the next morning and started using the kitchen sink for everything else. I sleep with the hallway light on now. Not because it helps, but because dark corners make it worse. That same night, I set up my phone in the hallway facing the corner. The one just outside the bathroom. The one where I kept feeling it. I turned on the motion detection, opened the live feed on my laptop, and stayed up watching. Hours passed. Nothing. Then around 3:17 a.m., the feed cut to black for 7 full seconds. When it came back, the camera was tilted slightly to the left. I didn't touch it. I started moving differently through the house, walking sideways so I could keep corners in view. Mirrors went up in every room, on tables, door frames, even taped to the ceiling above my bed so I could keep an eye on the hallway without leaving my room. It helped a little, but I had to sleep sometime, and that's when it got closer. I blinked. That's all it took. One blink. My eyes were burning from hours of staring at the hallway. I just needed a moment. I let them close and heard the couch scrape softly across the floor behind me. When I turned, it had shifted. Not much, just an inch. But it was no longer flush with the bedroom door. Something had nudged it from the other side. That's when I realized it doesn't move if I'm watching. That's the rule. It waits just out of sight. It only moves when you're not looking. The next morning, the bathroom door was open. The duct tape I'd used to seal it had been peeled off slowly, deliberately, like someone didn't want to make a sound. I didn't go near it. I didn't touch the tape. I just backed away and left it alone. Later that day, I called the landlord. I tried to stay calm, asked if anything weird had happened in the house, if other tenants ever complained. He got quiet, then he said, "You're not the first one to ask about that." When I pushed for more, he said, "If you're smart, you'll find somewhere else." Then he hung up. He won't answer my calls now. Things aren't staying in the same place anymore. Not just furniture, walls. I know how that sounds, but I swear it's true. The hallway feels shorter now. I keep bumping into things I never used to. Shadows fall differently. Corners are tighter. I measured everything. The numbers say nothing's changed. But when I walk through the house now, it feels like it's watching me back. Or worse, like it's folding in around me. I've stopped looking at mirrors. A few nights ago, I glanced at one on the dresser and saw myself smiling. I wasn't smiling. Sometimes I'll see something slipping out of frame when I turn my head. Always left, always behind. I don't turn my head anymore. I just keep walking, keep watching. Because if I don't, it'll move. And if it moves, I think it can finally reach me. About an hour ago, I found the front door wide open. Not unlocked, not damaged, just open. And nothing in the house had moved. Nothing knocked over. Nothing taken. It felt like an invitation, like it was giving me a chance. I didn't take it. Because here's the thing, I think that's the choice. Leave and it follows. Run and it stays close. But stay? Stay and it finally comes in. I'm writing this from bed. The camcorder screen is black. Not paused, not frozen, just off. I didn't turn it off. The hallway is quiet now. The light's still on, but it feels like it doesn't matter anymore. I haven't turned my head in over an hour. I can feel something breathing just behind me. I think it's already in the room. I know the rule now. It only moves when I'm not watching. So I'm going to sit here, eyes open, wide, burning. And if I blink... Final edit. If you're reading this, don't look away. Not even for a second. Because it might be in your house now, too.